The ship shakes before I even touch the ground, and I know something is wrong before my feet land on this planet called Earth. My hand is already reaching out. That is the first thing they teach us. Reach before you think, because thinking gives the mind time to build walls. I kneel in front of a small human girl standing near a swing set, her hair the color of wheat, her eyes wide but steady. Her name, I will later learn, is Grace. I place 2 fingers against her wrist, the way I have done on 11 other worlds before this one, and I open my mind to receive her. What I feel almost knocks me backward. I expected fear. Fear is simple. Fear has a shape, a texture, a weight I can measure in an instant. I have felt it in the small hands of 11 different species, and every time, it told me exactly how much pressure a civilization could take before it broke apart from the inside. That is our method. That is how we have conquered before, gently, quietly, without long wars, without heavy losses on either side. We do not need force when we already know the exact point where a species will surrender. But this child does not give me fear. Not first. Fear is there, buried somewhere underneath, small and human and ordinary. What rises to meet me instead is something enormous, something that feels older than her 7 years, something that does not belong to her alone. It feels like standing at the edge of a canyon and realizing the canyon has no bottom. I pull my hand back too quickly. The girl blinks at me, confused, maybe a little afraid now, but she does not run. A woman appears at the edge of the yard, calling her name, and Grace turns and walks toward her without looking back at me even once. I remain kneeling there long after they are gone, trying to understand what just happened to me. I do not report it right away. I tell myself it is an anomaly, a single strange result among what will surely be thousands of ordinary ones. I move to the next location, a small building filled with young humans learning letters and numbers, guided by 2 adults named Daniel and Emma. I choose a boy near the back of the room, a boy named Oliver, sitting quietly with a drawing in front of him. I kneel beside him the same way, and I touch his hand the same way, and I open myself the same way. It happens again. Underneath his fear, which is thin and quick and exactly what I expect from a child confronted by something unfamiliar, there is that same vast weight. It presses against my mind like water pressing against a cracked wall. I try to read its edges, try to measure how far down it goes, and I cannot find the bottom. I have never failed to find the bottom of anything before. I touch a 3rd child, a 4th, a 5th. Each time, the same impossible depth waits beneath the surface, fear, patient, and unmovable, like something that has always been there, and always will be. By the 6th child, the 2 adults in the room, Daniel and Emma, have positioned themselves between me and the young ones, their arms out, their faces calm but their bodies rigid, with a kind of readiness I do not yet understand. I withdraw. I tell myself I have enough information. I tell myself this is still an anomaly, even though some quiet part of me already knows it is not. I file my report anyway. I write that the readings show unusual depth in the emotional foundation of the young, but I add that the surface fear response remains consistent with prior successful assessments. I do not fully explain what I felt because I do not yet have the words for it, and because the conclave does not wait for uncertain reports. Our fleet is already in position. Our doctrine has never failed before. 11 worlds bowed to us without a single major battle, and the conclave sees no reason why this 12th world should be any different. The invasion begins 3 days later. I watch from orbit as our ships descend toward the cities. Our strategy is the same one that worked 11 times. We do not aim for buildings or armies first. We aim for fear, precise and calculated, delivered through careful, controlled displays meant to make parents choose surrender over resistance. It is efficient. It is clean. It has always worked, because in every species before this one, the thought of harm coming to a child was enough to make an entire population kneel. The humans do not kneel. I watch the first reports come in confusion, then in growing unease. Communities that should be fracturing along fault lines of fear are instead pulling closer together. Adults are organizing shelters, forming lines to move children away from danger, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of school doors and hospital wings, refusing to move even when our ships pass low overhead. There is fear in their eyes, real and visible, but it does not scatter them. It seems, impossibly, to bind them tighter. I request permission to return to the surface, to gather more information before our strategy escalates further. The conclave grants it, more out of curiosity now than trust. I land near a coastal town where a group of families has gathered inside a community hall, having been told this location offers the best shelter available. I stand outside the doors for a long moment before I go in, and even from there, I can feel something radiating from within, something that feels almost like heat rising off a road in summer. Inside, I see something I did not expect. There is no chaos. There is no fighting for space or supplies, though there easily could be. Instead, there are adults quietly giving up their own portions of food to children who claim they are not hungry. Parents singing softly to little ones trying to fall asleep despite the distant sound of our ships passing overhead. Older children looking after younger ones as if it is simply expected, simply normal, simply what one does. A boy named Nathan is telling a story to 3 younger children gathered around him, his voice calm and steady, though I can sense the fear trembling just beneath his composure. A woman named Charlotte moves quietly between groups, checking on each family, offering a small touch on the shoulder, a few words, a moment of calm before moving to the next. I approach a child sitting alone near the back wall, a boy of perhaps 5 years, and I kneel again, though I know now what I will find. His name, someone tells me later, is Ethan. I touch his hand gently, and again that same impossible depth rises to meet me, unshaken by everything happening around him. This time I do not withdraw. I let myself sit inside that depth for as long as I can bear it, trying to understand its shape, its source, its purpose. And slowly, I begin to see something. It is not a wall built for defense. It is not armor meant to protect this child from me. It is something built for him, long before I arrived, by every adult who ever chose to love him without expecting anything in return. It is built from small moments, so many small moments stacked one on top of another across years, that they have become something solid, something load-bearing, something that will not move no matter how much pressure I place against it. I understand, in that moment, that we made a terrible mistake before we ever arrived on this planet. Our doctrine assumes that fear is the deepest thing inside any living creature, because in every species before this one, it was. Threaten what a person loves most, and their fear response takes over completely, dissolving courage, dissolving unity, dissolving resistance until surrender feels like the only remaining option. It worked because fear, in those other species, truly was the floor beneath everything else they felt. In humans, fear is not the floor. It is only a layer sitting above something much older and much stronger, something built specifically to survive exactly this kind of pressure, something humans have apparently been building and rebuilding for their entire history without ever being told to. I do not yet understand why this species developed such a thing when none of the others did, but I understand, with growing dread, that our entire strategy is now working against us instead of for us. Every time our ships create fear near a child, the adults around that child do not scatter, they gather. Every threat we make becomes another brick laid onto that same foundation, another reason for the people around that child to hold tighter, rather than let go. We are, without meaning to, showing an entire species exactly what they must protect, and in doing so, we are making them stronger with every passing hour. I send an urgent message back to the fleet, urging caution, urging a full pause in operations until we understand this properly. My message arrives too late. The Conclave has already ordered a wider display near one of the larger cities, believing that greater pressure will finally produce the surrender that smaller pressure failed to achieve. I feel the shift in the air even before the reports confirm it. Something in the balance of this war has changed, and it will not change back in our favor. What follows over the next several days does not resemble any of our previous conquests. There is no clean surrender. There is no quiet folding of a population under pressure. Instead, there is coordination we did not expect from a species we assumed would be too afraid to organize. Messages move quickly between towns and cities. Adults who have never met one another begin working together within hours, sharing shelter locations, sharing supplies, sharing knowledge about the patterns of our ships. Children are moved calmly and quickly whenever a warning arrives, guided by adults who seem to have rehearsed this exact kind of danger for years, though I later learned they had not rehearsed anything like us specifically. They had simply always trained themselves to protect their young against whatever came, because the possibility of danger, in some form, was never treated as unthinkable here. It was treated as something to prepare for. I watch a woman named Amelia lead a line of children through a quiet street, her voice never rising, her hands never shaking, even as our presence looms above them. I watch a man named Ryan carry 2 children at once across an open field toward shelter, his breathing hard but his pace steady, refusing to slow even as fear plainly shows on his face. Fear does not stop these people. It runs alongside them, and somehow it does not win. Weeks pass, though it feels shorter than that from where I sit. Our advantage, the one advantage our doctrine always relied upon, keeps eroding. Populations we expected to fracture instead grow more organized. Leaders we expected to fall into panic instead calmly coordinate defense and evacuation with a discipline that surprises even our most experienced commanders. It becomes clear that this species has spent generations quietly preparing for exactly this kind of test, not because they ever expected visitors from beyond their world, but because they had always understood that protecting their young sometimes requires exactly this kind of unshaken calm. I am called before the conclave to explain my original assessment. I stand before them and tell them the truth, difficult as it is to say aloud. I tell them that I made an error, not in my methods, but in my assumptions. I tell them that I mistook a foundation for a feeling, that I touched children expecting to find the limit of their fear, and instead found something with no measurable limit at all. I tell them that every action we have taken since our arrival has strengthened the very thing we hope to break. The conclave does not immediately accept this. Doctrine built over centuries of prior success does not bend easily, even in the face of clear failure. Additional pressure is ordered. Additional displays are planned. Each one meets the same result. Populations grow steadier rather than weaker. Coordination grows tighter rather than looser. What should have been a swift and quiet conquest becomes something none of us recognize, something with no clear path toward the outcome we expected. I return to the surface one final time before our withdrawal is ordered, drawn by something I cannot fully explain even to myself. I find myself standing near a small garden where a group of children is playing quietly under the watch of two adults, a woman named Lucy and a man named Aiden, both clearly exhausted, both clearly frightened, and both still smiling gently at the children in front of them as if nothing in the sky above could possibly matter more than this quiet, ordinary moment. I watch a small girl offer half of her food to a boy sitting beside her without being asked. I watch the boy accept it without hesitation, as if such generosity between strangers is simply expected here, simply normal, simply what one does when someone nearby has less than you. I do not touch any of them this time. I have learned enough. I simply watch, and in watching, I understand something our doctrine never accounted for. This foundation I felt beneath every human child is not something rare or accidental. It is something this species builds deliberately, over and over, in ordinary moments that seem too small to matter, until those moments stack high enough to hold an entire people steady against pressure that should have broken them completely. Our withdrawal begins not long after. The conclave, faced with mounting losses and no clear path toward the surrender we once considered guaranteed, chooses to abandon the campaign rather than continue losing resources against a species whose deepest strength we never anticipated and still do not fully understand. I am asked, before our final departure, what should be recorded for any future encounter with a species like this one. I tell them the truth as plainly as I can. I tell them that our method depends entirely on finding the bottom of what a species feels, and that this method fails completely against any species whose deepest feeling is not fear but something built specifically to outlast it. I tell them that if we ever send another assessor to a world like this one, that assessor should not measure how deep the fear goes. They should measure how deep the love goes instead, and if no bottom can be found, they should turn back immediately, because any war fought against that kind of foundation cannot be won through pressure of any kind. Our ships leave orbit quietly, without the grand ceremony that marked our departures from the 11 worlds before this one. There is no formal surrender to record, no treaty to sign, no population left kneeling in the aftermath. There is only a planet full of people who never fully understood how close they came to a very different outcome, and a species retreating quietly into the dark, having learned far too late that the deepest thing inside a human being is not something that can be broken by force, because it was never built to break in the first place. I think often, even now, about that first afternoon, about a small girl named Grace standing near a swing set, her wrist small and warm beneath my fingers, her fear thin and ordinary and exactly what I expected to find. I think about everything I felt underneath that fear, the vast, unmeasurable depth that I mistook, at first, for something strange and isolated, rather than something ancient and universal among her entire species. We came expecting to find a floor. What we found instead was a foundation with no visible end, built quietly, patiently, across countless small acts of care that no single generation ever seems to notice they are building, until an entire species stands upon it without ever having chosen to, simply because every adult before them chose, again and again, to place something solid beneath the feet of every child who came after them. That is the reason our conquest failed, not weapons, not numbers, not strategy of any kind. It was a small hand, warm beneath my fingers, holding steady against a pressure that should have broken it completely, because somewhere beneath that small, ordinary fear, something far older and far stronger had already decided it would not.